I mean, I would recommend that they come out and try to talk to some of the people that are going to be around. We don't bite. We're happy to talk. And like Derek said, we're trying to reach out and talk to as many Canadians as possible.
That is how you heal a country, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Northern Perspective, everyone. I'm Cypher.
And I'm Fox. Freedom Convoy supporters have made their way to Ottawa this weekend to remind Justin Trudeau and the rest of Ottawa that Canadians haven't forgotten what happened 2 years ago and that we're still willing to make our voices heard in order to save this country from collusion, corruption, and calamity.
First, let's take a look at how the mainstream media is portraying this reunion.
Reunion is underway in the capital 2 years after hundreds of police officers cleared protesters out of the downtown core, protesters who had refused to leave. Caitlin Wilson joining us live now. What's planned to mark the end of the Freedom Convoy? Caitlin?
Graham, unlike what we saw 2 years ago, organizers say this weekend's event will be filled with speeches and music, calling it a day of remembrance fueled by optimism.
2 years after police removed protesters from Parliament Hill, the so-called Freedom Movement is coming back to mark the 2-year anniversary.
It's a hollow victory for us. And it's a hollow victory for us because of what had occurred.
The reunion comes after a recent federal court decision that found the use of the Emergencies Act to clear protesters was unreasonable and infringed on their charter rights. Organizers now say they want an apology from the government.
People's lives have been disrupted, maybe changed forever, all for their right to fight for the freedoms that we have in this country.
The Emergencies Act was invoked after thousands took over the streets around Parliament Hill, many opposing COVID-19 restrictions, blocking roads with big rig trucks and other vehicles for weeks. A public inquiry arrived at a different conclusion, that the government was justified in using the Emergencies Act.
We're trying to reach out and talk to as many Canadians as possible. So if people have concerns, come talk to someone.
The Ottawa Police Service says it's been in contact with organizers and has a plan in place to deal with any demonstrations and to ensure public safety. Organizers insist there will be no vehicles used as part of the gathering or loudspeakers during the march. Still, some are skeptical about the return.
I think celebrations themselves are beautiful. I'm not enthusiastic about reliving it.
We saw weeks go by before we saw the cops there at all. It was just shocking, the whole thing.
A class action lawsuit is currently underway, made up of residents who claim they suffered from the noise and disruption caused 2 years ago.
Created a lot of reverberations that we're still experiencing today. A lot of strong feelings from across the country, and we're still kind of dealing with the fallout from that.
Hundreds are expected to gather on the Hill Saturday, expressing a laundry list of issues in what it describes as government overreach.
And the event kicks off on Parliament Hill at 11 a.m. and includes a march through downtown. The route is still being finalized, so residents are encouraged to check the city's website and social media for any road closures. Graham?
All right, Caitlin, what about that pending class action lawsuit? Where does that stand now?
While it's still very much alive, Graham, lawyers for the plaintiff, downtown Ottawa residents say they're pushing ahead, and there's a lot of money at stake. There's $5.5 million raised online by protesters, which was seized and frozen during the court process. If the plaintiffs win, that money will go to them, but the case is a long way from actually getting in front of a judge.
Wow.
There are so many things wrong with that. Where should we start?
All right. Well, okay, so first of all, it's not surprising that they spoke about the fact that the Emergencies Act was declared unconstitutional for maybe like half a second. And then they mentioned the class action lawsuit more times than they mentioned the fact that the Emergencies Act was actually deemed unconstitutional by Judge Mosley's ruling.
Well, and they didn't even use the word unconstitutional. They said it infringed upon their charter rights. That's unconstitutional, folks.
Right. But, they don't want to come out and say that.
Right. They don't want to use a strong word like unconstitutional, even though that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And they mentioned the class action lawsuit that is against the Freedom Convoy and the protesters, but they didn't mention the class action lawsuit that Freedom Convoy protesters are launching against the government in defense of their charter rights.
Right? Because, you know, let's not bother mention the one that actually is going to have some teeth, and the reason why it has teeth is because the first lawsuit was successful in actually determining that the Emergencies Act was deemed unconstitutional. And the other thing that I find just absolutely rich is this class action lawsuit from these people in Ottawa. So if they're successful, they get the $5 million that was raised for the trucker convoy. That's ridiculous. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. But here's the thing. It doesn't have a chance. Not a chance in heck in getting before a judge, because that kind of contradicts the justification for the Emergency Act being overturned, and it also will contradict the Tamara Leach and Chris Barber trial, which that doesn't really have a chance of going anywhere either. So there's no chance, I think, that this makes it to court. But, you know, that's what mainstream media is talking about. And here's the other thing. We're about to go through the entire press conference for the actual the Freedom Convoy reunion leaders. And it's about 26 minutes long. They showed you about 5 seconds. And it was just a couple clips, and you can't even remember what they are because, you know, they just went on to talk about other things. And they call it the so-called freedom movement. Okay. Just like you're the so-called mainstream media and you're the so-called journalists that are trying to report the so-called truth. Well, that's why we're here. We're here to bring you the actual truth. And this is why we're showing you both sides. We're showing you the mainstream media side, and then we're going to show you exactly what was said.
Let's hear from the organizers, Derek Noonan and Chris Dacey.
Good afternoon, everyone. My apologies for the delay. As well as I wanted to have some more panelists as well. With the inclement weather, unfortunately, they couldn't get in time. But just also, too, I don't know, sir, if the press is related. We're obviously with the freedom movement. And one thing in particular, if I was to have, say, maybe a red maple leaf on and freedom across that, I would not be able to enter the building. So that's just a note. And it does cause quite a bit of delays for freedom fighters, for example, if they wanted to just simply come in and watch Parliament.
So we want to touch on what was just said about, you know, not being allowed to enter Parliament with a shirt that says freedom and have a maple leaf on there. Now, there is a standing rule that just about every Canadian legislature bans visitors from wearing clothing sporting slogans deemed to be either in bad taste or conveying a partisan message. That seems to be the justification that is being used here.
It's disgusting to me that a maple leaf, which is a symbol of our country, and the word freedom, which is something that we should all aspire to, is considered either partisan or offensive.
Or a political message.
Yeah.
Like, that's pretty ridiculous.
That's gross.
Folks.
That's gross.
And obviously there's a bit of extra instructions, no doubt, that the parliamentary police have been given by the Liberal government on this. So that's where we're at, folks. And, you know, so when they arrived, that was what they were greeted with. Guaranteed, before 2 years ago, that would have been okay.
But again, this is just mind-boggling to me. And not only that, but it like just makes me feel so gross, like in the pit of my stomach. Because again, as Canadians, freedom is something that we should be fighting for and that we should be protecting. It should be a positive thing. It should not be either partisan or offensive. And the fact that either Parliament or the Parliament police or whoever you want to blame thinks that this is not a appropriate message to have in Parliament is just astounding.
But really why I'm here is we're all well aware of the ruling by Justice Mosley in relation to the Emergency Act, which was called upon by the Trudeau government. Now, it was quite stated that it was unjustified and unconstitutional. Now, being amongst the freedom movement, obviously people ask and they say that was a great victory. You guys must be happy for this. But I must say, no, it's a hollow victory for us. And it's a hollow victory for us because of what had occurred. People's lives have been disrupted, maybe changed forever. Charges, loss of income, loss of jobs, all for their right to fight for the freedoms that we have in this country. However, it did note one important thing, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to be here to address this. It exposed, this ruling, exposed the lies, falsehood, and myths, truths that accompanied 2 years ago while we were here in Ottawa protesting. Everything from breaking into stores to arson. It was all proven that it never happened. They were all falsehoods. Many MPs stated these were concerns, stated that somehow people practicing their rights under our charter and under our freedom of rights was some sort of a threat to this country. And many MPs on the Liberal side perpetuated these lies. We have still not had an apology for those lies from any MP in the government. I do not want to speak for groups within the freedom movement that have started litigation processes, but there are litigation processes underway right now. So I won't speak any further to that, but there has. Ideally, an apology from the government would help in some matter. But what happened was, and what is extremely disturbing on a historical presence, I believe Canada itself changed very dramatically on that last day, 2 years ago on the 17th. Because what had occurred is we had our ruling government weaponize police officers, weaponize the establishment, and weaponize the justice system against its own people. Now, these were people that our Prime Minister labeled many words, called them a threat, said we couldn't go on trains, said we couldn't fly, all because we challenged and we wanted, basically, our own health. We weren't willing to take something that was really experimental. And the evidence that has come up, although it's being pushed down, will eventually prove to that point that we were correct. But really, I really want to stick to the message that our police were weaponized, our justice system were weaponized against our people. And historically, that has not done very well for companies when a leader against a group he disagrees with in a country uses violence to suppress them. Is a very slippery slope. Now, I do also want to salute to all those that were involved in the original convoy for their bravery and their foresight. That foresight, they realized what is happening. They realize that we have a government in place that is really ideologically driven. They do have I will use this word tyranny because I believe someone in the media said that our main goal right now is to fight tyranny. But if tyranny is, and quite simple, there's several bills that are going to restrict freedom of speech in this country. We have people in Parliament wanting just simply a law in place as anyone that supports our oil industry to be in jail for 2 years. That this is the type of ideological thinking that's causing extreme divisions in this country. I can't remember in our history, and other besides the senior, where the government has basically waged war on one of the provinces in this country without negotiation.
Although you can see that Derek Noonan is incredibly nervous, I do want to applaud him for the job that he's doing. considering he's, obviously not very experienced in speaking to the press, I think he's doing very, very well. He's keeping his tone measured. He's keeping his words measured. He's obviously, rehearsed this many times, and he's doing very well. And he's making some really good points. He's doing a good job in staying on point of the injustice that was highlighted in Judge Mosley's ruling regarding the Emergencies Act, and highlighting all of the important points about a government coming after its people and weaponizing legislation in order to activate police and extreme measures such as the freezing of the bank accounts and other measures to put down a protest. And that's all it was. It wasn't an uprising, it wasn't an occupation, it was a protest. And sounds like they have a very simple ask. They want an apology.
And he also made reference to the fact that the government is using legislation to stamp out free speech. One of the bills that he made reference to is Bill C-372, which we discussed, I believe it was last week, regarding the private members bill from the NDP to limit any positive advertising or discussion even about fossil fuels.
Yeah, like, where is this country going where you were, quite simply, we're almost to the point where you're not allowed to say certain things, and it's not that there's insults, it's you're not allowed to talk about things that the government doesn't want you to talk about.
Or that the NDP is perfectly happy to hand out hard drugs to adolescents and young adults and doesn't want you talking favorably about fossil fuels. This is insane. And the thing is, all these bills and this legislation, it's able to exist because as Canadians, we don't really do anything about it. Can you imagine if 100, 500, 1,000, 10,000 Canadians started writing these NDP and saying, hey, I don't like this bill that you're trying to put in. It infringes on my rights and freedoms. Stop it.
And this is why protesting is so important, and it must be fought for, and it must be protected. So again, we applaud Derek Noonan here and his partner Chris Dacey that are speaking in the microphones for organizing this and again letting the Liberal government know that Canadians are willing to stand up and fight for this. It's one of the reasons for the genesis of Northern Perspective.
So tomorrow, Saturday, the 17th, starting at 11 a.m., there's a permit issued on Parliament Hill. So most of our activities will be on Parliament Hill. That begins at 11. There's some music. We're hoping to have speeches around probably noon. And then the planned march is at 2 p.m. So we've been working with Ottawa Police to figure out a route for that. There are some other things going on in the city. It's the final weekend of Winterlude this weekend, and there's also some other planned protests. So the parade or the march route isn't exactly finalized yet, but we're working with Ottawa Police to make sure that that's going to go off okay. And then we're back to the Hill after the march till about 5 o'clock probably.
People you're expecting from out of town, and can you address the notion of whether or not this is a vehicle-based protest?
Yeah, okay. So there was some messaging that came out earlier today, I believe, CPC maybe. No, there's not expected to be any kind of vehicle protest of any sort. There are a group of people coming from Southern Ontario that will be traveling together, and they've collected some donations for a local church. So they'll be coming into town together, dropping off those donations to Capital City Bikers Church.
What's your message to Ottawa residents who don't like the convoy?
I mean, I would recommend that they come out and try to talk to some of the people that are going to be around. We don't bite. We're happy to talk. And like Derek said, we're trying to reach out and talk to as many Canadians as possible. Mm-hmm. So if people have concerns, come talk to someone. I think that's the best way to start.
That right there is the difference between the right and the left.
That was a great message by Chris Dacey right there. Come and talk to us. We don't bite. That's perfect. That is how you heal a country, ladies and gentlemen. You don't heal a country by demonizing people, by calling them names, and basically telling them that they don't matter and they're not real Canadians.
Or that they're not welcome, or that their opinions are wrong and you don't want to hear them. And this is what I think the right does very, very well, is we will sit down and have that discussion with people who may not necessarily agree with our point of view. But we'll sit down with them, we'll speak with them, we'll be civil. We may not agree in the end, but the fact is that we'd sit down and have that discussion.
Well, and damn, like it's about time Canadians on the left remembered, because they knew it once. But it would be nice if they remembered that you can be friends with people, you can be respectful with people, you can be civil to people that don't share your politics. Like it never used to divide us as Canadians. Nobody cared who you voted for in the last election.
I mean, we might make fun of each other, but, it's all in good humor. It's not to be malicious. It's not to be nasty.
Yeah, but now, like, look at us. We have to hide ourselves. There's people that are fired from their jobs. There's people that are ostracized from their community, from their families, from their friends. This is what I love about the message that Chris Stacey is talking about here. He's doing a really good job here. And that's one of positivity, one of hope, and one of healing.
You want to reach the general public. How do you plan on doing that?
Well, starting with this, I guess.
Definitely. There are several things we like to reach out to the general public is their understanding of the issues that are at hand within the government in terms of the alleged corruption, the alleged theft. Are they happy with the way government is behaving? There's no accountability, no disclosure of actually what's occurring on several matters. And the biggest thing is 65% of this country has less than $500 left over at the end of the month. Now, the government that's in play right now has basically come out and said that they're for the middle class. So if they're for the middle class, I ask the general public, having less than $500 left over at the end of the month, is that a government for you? Is it a government for you that has more increased taxes on April 1st? Is this a government for you in which they're proceeding with censorship bills that are down lead? Is this a government for you that priorities are constantly shifting? Do I see any priorities for housing veterans? Do I see any priorities for fixing the housing on First Nations? We're still waiting after 8 years for clean water on First Nations lands. So these are the types of things that we talk about. The poverty, how are our children being educated in school? These are several issues that we want to reach out to the community on.
Although he's struggling to get through it, well done, Derek Noonan.
And these are the things that Canadians should be thinking about and that we should be talking about with each other. It's surprising to us, when we talk to people in our lives and we ask some of these questions, are you happy with the way your life has been the past 8 years? Do you think you're faring better now, 8 years later, than you were under the Harper government? Do you think the government's policies are benefiting you? And people say, no, things are bad, et cetera, et cetera. And then you make the suggestion, well, why don't you vote Conservative? Or why are you still voting Liberal? And that's just the way they've always done it. And that's the way they want to continue to do it. There's such a disconnect with what the government is doing and who they think they should vote for.
And, we don't know the ins and outs of Derek Noonan, but what I can say is he's doing something right now that I'll say all men should be doing. And it's something that I mentor, people on. And what it is, when you reach a certain point in life, you have a responsibility to turn around, reach down, and pull the next person up.
That's it. You don't pull the ladder up behind you. You turn around and you extend your hand.
So the fact that these guys are using this platform right here, this opportunity, to not just talk about the Freedom Convoy, but to talk about all of the other challenges in this country that don't have any direct link to them, that's very admirable. And that's a very Canadian thing to do. And, you know, that should be admired because they're literally turning around and extending a hand to these other issues. Like, you know, housing for First Nations. How's the media and Trudeau going to disagree with that? They can't. So it's just an example of, you know, really what it means to be Canadian. And some people, they just need a reminder of what it used to be so they can start getting back to being Canadian.
And I know there's concerns. The poverty is increasing. Homelessness is increasing. You're seeing in, like, the small town of Brockville, on one day, 12 people died from overdoses within 2 hours from fentanyl. Is that the country? I'm asking the citizens, is this the country you want to live in? Is it? Where you can't trust the government? Where we're seeing theft, we can't get answers to past corruption? There's taxes and taxes in our future. Is this what we want to live in? Do we want to live in this division as well? Do we want to live in a country where one province is somehow wrong? The one province that has fed this whole nation for quite some time, we can't negotiate? Do we want to live in a country where arbitrarily a minister comes out and says, I'm not making roads anymore? When we need roads to First Nations in the north, at least, when we have crumbling infrastructure in our cities now? All in the name of ideology, all unproven? So these are the things I'm reaching out to the general public. I know they're feeling the same thing. And it will take collectively all of us to change it. It will take collectively all of us to make the government aware that they're accountable to us. They don't rule us. They're accountable to us.
Good job, Derek. Very well said, especially since you're answering off the cuff. And, you know, you can tell that came from the heart. And we could use a lot more heart when it comes to Canadian politics.
Are you expecting to receive any support from MPs?
I can answer that. Yes, so there has been several MPs that have spoken out harshly on the use of the Emergency Act. That really, according to Justice Mosley, there really wasn't any basis for it at all. So I do appreciate those MPs speaking out on that. I'm hoping that they will be in attendance tomorrow as well.
Are you expecting them?
I did give some overtures. We'll see if they come.
What parties?
Primarily the Conservative Party's been the only party that has come out against the use of the Emergency Act. Me personally, I won't mention their names, but I have had some very good conversations with members of the NDP and the Liberals that do see what I just said, but they can't control the directions of their parties as well. So hopefully they'll be there too.
Isn't that interesting? If true, that is very, very interesting. And I can't see any reason why he would be untrue.
Yeah, to me, that information is not surprising. As we saw yesterday in our video with Mark Holland, I think that the Liberals and the NDP, but the Liberals especially, are just starting to separate from their party. They know what they've been up to is wrong, and they don't want to support it anymore.
Well, and they're seeing the reaction of Canadians across the country, and it's growing, right? The like the latest Abacus poll had the Conservatives at 43%.
That's huge.
That's a massive number. For Canadian politics, that's a massive, massive number. It's ridiculous. 20 points ahead of the Liberals. Double-digit leads are big in Canada, but 20 points. So they're seeing this, and they're seeing what the ideology that they're being forced to follow is taking them down. And some of them, they're just they can't deal with it anymore. So there wasn't much left. We just want to say that I think this is really smart, and I hope that all of the events carry with them a positive sentiment It's not going to be all positive in the respect that, what happened 2 years ago was a violation on the Canadian people. And there's no other way to put it. It was an illegal violation and an abuse of government power on the Canadian people. And it should never have happened. And it has never happened in the Western world.
And hopefully we will make sure that it never happens again.